Good morning. My name is Don Obrist, O-B-R-I-S-T. I'm with the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program at the University of Florida, Gainesville, Florida. And I am interviewing today Howard Frohnapple, who is a combat veteran of World War II. He flew as a navigator in B-24s. And today's date is July 12th, Thursday, 2012. And I'm going to start off by asking Howard to state his name and to spell his last name.
Hello, this is Howard Frohnapple. The last name is Frohnapple. F as in Frank, R-O-H-N-A-P-P-L-E.
Okay, now Howard, what's your birth date?
By coincidence, it's July 13th, 1919. Okay. Tomorrow then is my birthday.
What a way to celebrate your birthday, right? Reminiscing about your experiences. Congratulations. And where were you born?
In Cleveland, Ohio.
Okay. And you had mentioned to me prior that you spent time in Buffalo, New York?
Afterwards, okay. In Buffalo. After I graduated from the University of Buffalo and I got myself established, did a few local things, I then moved to Buffalo, New York.
Mm-hmm. How old were you? Do you remember how old were you when you moved to Buffalo?
Approximately 19.
Okay. Okay. And then you graduated, you said, from University of Buffalo?
Well, actually, I did under the GI Bill.
After the war?
After the war.
Okay. Okay. We can talk about that, in a little while. Tell me about life in Cleveland. Tell me about your mom and dad, and do you have brothers and sisters?
I have one brother, 7 years older than I, who found much greater interest in things that a younger brother wouldn't be interested in. So we had the unfortunate situation of my parents divorcing, at which point, I was strictly on my own.
At what age?
That would then be about 19.
Okay. Okay.
And then after that, of course, I moved up to Buffalo, where my father happened to be living because he had completed an obligation for the Truscon Steel Company as credit manager of their establishment. And so I moved in with him until I eventually wound up in the Air Force.
Now, how did you enter? Now, the Air Force, we call it the Air Force, but it was the Army Air Corps.
Correct.
It was still part of the Army at that time.
Yes.
How did you end up in the Army Air Corps, and how old were you? Okay.
I was working at Curtiss Wright building P-40s, pursuit aircraft. And in discussion with some of the locals, I found out that the airport had a program called Aviation Cadets. Well, I had no reason not to accept that, and had every reason because it would make a real contribution to the war effort. So, examining my present position with the young lady, Frances Cromer, who was my girlfriend, she and I were making a contribution in that we were speakers to industry, to business groups, the public in general, in two respects. The first was that we attempted to interest people in buying the federal government war bonds. The second was to turn out to be extremely important to me, and that was the Red Cross blood donor program, where we did assist through speaking in supplying perhaps hundreds, maybe even beyond that, pints of blood to the military service.
Okay, now this was as part of your participation in the cadet program?
No.
No. Okay, bring me up to speed on that.
But at that,
Okay, what time frame was this when you were speaking? Was it before the war?
that's
During the war.
during the war.
That was during the war.
Oh, yes.
This was during the war. You were not in the Air Force yet?
Not yet. However,
Okay.
on examination, after, maybe 2 years of these speeches for the program, war program, I came across the Aviation Cadet program.
I see.
And I said,
Okay.
we discussed, meaning my girlfriend and I discussed, we'd like to do something more military-like. So she joined the Navy Wave program, and I went for examination for the Aviation Cadet program.
Okay.
They accepted her gladly and put her in quite a nice assignment in the New York City area. Myself, when I was examined, they found that I was such a lightweight, I could not pass the physical. So there I was, not in the program. Well, I continued to work at Curtis Wright.
Now, can I ask, what this was after Pearl Harbor? This was after Pearl Harbor, all this transpired?
I've never had that question come up.
After 1941. This was during the war while this was going on, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, they were drafting people.
Oh, yes.
Why weren't you not drafted at this point? Did you have a deferment because of working at the Curtis Wright?
I could very well have.
Okay.
My number never came up.
Okay. Okay.
So now I did try to correct my physical condition
Tried to gain weight?
again, and I couldn't. So when I was re-examined for the second time, I was deferred. Well, here's my wife-to-be in the waves and me not. So what was I going to do? Well, I found the answer. I worked the third shift at Curtis. On the way back on the bus the following week, I ate a bunch of bananas and drank an entire quart of milk and went back to the same doctor that had previously examined me. And he said to me, "You know, young man, you really want to get in, don't you?" I said, "Yes, sir, I do." And by golly, I then made it as an aviation cadet.
Okay. Okay. Great story. Now, what did you do as a member of the Aviation Cadet program?
Okay. We had several other young men from the Buffalo area to go to Nashville, Tennessee, where there's a tremendous arrangement for testing young people from all around the country. Very intensive examination, both physically and mentally. And it was an experience like I've never had before or since. I was very lucky to pass all the exams. And at that point, they assigned me to Monroe, Louisiana as a school to make a choice. A little earlier, I had been given the opportunity to be a pilot, a navigator, or a bombardier. I could have gone any of the three ways. My choice was Navigator. And the reason for it is rather simple. I always like to know where I was going. And while it's a little funny, I figured maybe it would be useful afterwards. Since I didn't plan to join any gang after the war and bomb people, the bombardier was out, and the pilot, I would like to have done both.
Mm-hmm.
But
So,
on we went to Monroe, Louisiana, where we had our own building with an ordinary type school and a wooden
okay,
building.
were you in the Air Force, in the Army Air Corps at this point, or were you still in the Aviation Cadet program?
Which is part of
It's
the Air Force.
part of the Air Force. Okay.
Yes, I was in that.
But were you actually a member of the Army Air Corps at this point?
It's a technical problem I've never
Okay.
had raised.
Okay. You were in the Army at this
Yeah,
point. You were there.
right.
You were in. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
So this was a real challenge because these classes were just like you might have in a rural school.
Mm-hmm.
The competition was very intense because we had, let's say, 40, maybe 45 men, and they were from all over. Many of them were college students or graduates of college. And here we were, a few of us were simple high school people. However, we had a very good instructor, and he did such a good job that when the final for our training there came about, we held our own and we all made it. And at that point, I was made a second lieutenant
Okay.
and sent to Monroe, Louisiana.
Mm-hmm.
Pardon me. Come in. Wait a minute.
Now, you said you became a second lieutenant.
Yeah.
Was that usual that when you
Yes.
graduated
Yes.
as a navigator, you would become an officer? Or were
Yeah.
some of them just enlisted men?
No.
No. The navigators were officers?
Oh, I see what you mean.
Yeah.
No, you're right. You raised a good point. We're not recording
Yeah,
this.
yeah, we are. Yeah, we're
Oh,
recording
okay.
now. Yeah,
No, we were like privates.
right.
And upon completion of our studies,
Right.
then we would be appointed
An officer.
second lieutenants.
Right, right.
Okay.
Okay, so that, I guess what I'm getting at is that came with the navigator title was
Yes.
an officer. You became an officer.
Right.
Right. That's quite a leap.
Yeah, well, at the time we became officers, we were assigned bomb groups. I was with the 445th Bomb Group, 702 Bomb Squadron. I have it marked as 702nd.
Okay.
Okay, and that was B-24 Liberator information.
Okay.
Okay.
Now, do you remember what year this was when you completed school? No.
I
Okay.
don't-
Well, okay. Let me back up a minute. You had told me previously, and this has not been part of the interview yet, but you had told me offline that you flew missions on D-Day.
Yes.
Okay, we won't get into that specifically. So this had to be at least 1943
Yeah, right.
in that period of time.
Very good, yes.
Okay, that you went to school. Now, let me ask you, the first time you went up in a B-24,
Yes.
what was your recollections of that? How'd you feel?
Yeah, it's like another airplane.
Uh-huh.
I wasn't overwhelmed. We had a couple of flights in training planes,
Mhm.
and I suppose some people were overwhelmed. To me, it was just another means of transportation.
Get from point A to point B, right?
Yes.
It's kind of noisy though, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And drafty.
Right, right. When was the first time you had to use oxygen? I guess at 10,000 feet and above, you had to use oxygen?
Well, actually, the first time was in training, where they had a tank sized deal. By tank, you have to picture a cylindrical vehicle laid on the ground, big enough to hold a dozen men. And this was our training to be put in there and the inside evacuated to remove the oxygen in a synthetic trip to high altitude.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure that many of us gagged and were fighting for air when they stopped.
Mm-hmm.
And there was no real danger, but there was an exposure to what high altitude flying is.
So what they were trying to do is make you aware, once you get that 10,000 feet or above, what it was like.
Exactly.
Okay, okay.
And it worked very well.
Okay.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now what?
Now you've completed navigator school.
Right.
Oh, can I ask you also, in training, can you give me some of your recollections what it was the first time you actually had to navigate that B-24 yourself? You were actually the navigator?
Yeah.
You were responsible? How'd you feel? Were you very nervous? Did you feel comfortable?
Oddly enough, the training and the pressures that we had been put under permitted us to be too acceptable. I was going to say comfortable.
Right. Never comfortable, but acceptable is a great term.
Right.
Yeah, that's great. Okay.
And there were always like 4 or 5 of us in the training ship, as was true with the B-24 navigators. And we came down and that was it. And at that point, I guess, is when we received our promotion and became second lieutenants.
Now, I would imagine there has to be a lot of pressure. There's a lot of pressure on every single crew member because every crew member does something to help the team.
And we had 10 of them.
Right, 10 for a crew. Yes.
10 in one plane.
Right, right.
Each plane had 10 members.
What about the responsibility? You owe responsibility to every one of those people on the plane, particularly to the pilots, because you're telling them where you are and where you're going to go. Right. How did you deal with that? How did you feel?
We used a PA system. That's all. Talk back and forth. We had our maps all laid out, of course, and so there was reference. There's a saying that navigators should make an entry in their log every 3 minutes. A lot of fellows were very loose about that, but I was conscientious, and I continued to do that.
Interesting. Now, also, I've wondered about this. I understand that as you go into your bombing run, the bombardier takes over control of the plane. Is that true, or?
That is substantially true.
Okay.
He works through the pilot, of course.
Okay.
But they coordinate together.
I see.
And if there's a goof up, the navigator takes over.
Okay. So once you go into...
From the bombardier.
Right. So once you go into a bombing run, you as the navigator, you're done for a period of time until you do your bombing run?
No. I'm on standby.
I see. Okay. So you're still recording where you are? And,
yes.
Okay. You're just not communicating necessarily with the pilot because the bombardier is the one who's doing that.
But that's only a matter of a few minutes.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Now, before we get on specifics of where you went after training and all your experiences there, I wanted to ask you about, and I know you weren't the bombardier, but one of the pieces of equipment in that plane, very well known now, of course, is the Norden bomb sight,
Yeah.
Norden
Yeah.
bomb sight. What do you know about that? What the bombardiers ever say? Did they ever say anything to you about that? How good of a piece of equipment it was? Or?
No.
Okay. Because I understand the Germans really wanted to get their hands on one of those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah. So I guess you just look upon it as another piece of equipment on the plane
Yes.
that you would have to use.
We had used the gym floor, a local school, I guess it was, with a synthetic bomb run.
Mm-hmm.
And we were all exposed to simulated bombing by the use of this device,
Mm-hmm.
which was a wheeled cart, if you will. And that's about it.
Mm-hmm. You just do your job.
Yeah.
Do your job. Okay, now you've become a second lieutenant.
Yeah.
You're a certified navigator on a
Right.
B-24. Where did you go from Louisiana? What was next?
Okay. We went to what some in the Air Force call the world's healthiest air base in our B-24. That was our first run, which was out in California.
Okay.
And they called it the world's healthiest air base because the temperature was so damn hot you could hardly stand it. And the blowing winds were so great that it was almost impossible to walk around at all.
And where was this in California?
I want to say Blythe,
Okay.
but I'm not sure.
Okay.
But that only lasted about 3 days, much to our surprise, because the billet that we were in was a wooden billet, and no matter how hard they tried around the windows and doors, the blowing wind would sift the sand into the building, including our beds and everything else.
Couldn't have been good for the planes.
No.
No.
And so we were due to leave shortly. But I have got to mention something about the commander of that base. He used to ride a motorcycle. And God help you if you happen to be outside and he was going by on his motorcycle and you failed to salute him, because he'd turn that machine around, double back, and chew you out.
Now, how did you know he was an officer? Because he was the guy on the motorcycle?
Because others before us passed the word down.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
you saw somebody on a motorcycle, you saluted.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's fine.
And then back to Florida, and then from there is when we did our flying.
Now, let me ask you, the 10 crew members on your plane,
Yes.
they were all part of your team. You were
Yeah.
assigned to all these people were assigned to the plane.
Yeah.
Did you all train together?
No.
No, you did not.
No.
Okay. So,
Toward the end we did, of course,
right.
but not from nothing up.
Mm-hmm.
As a matter of fact, our whole unit was considered to be a replacement unit for planes that had been lost in combat when we first got over into England.
Right. So the 10 guys on your plane, were there any?
4 officers and 6 enlisted.
Okay. How close? Were you close? Were you close friends, or you were close because you had to do a job?
I would say yes. There was no rank difference.
You were good friends. You're friends. You
Yes.
felt comfortable with one another.
Right.
Okay.
Absolutely.
There was really no dissension, personality
No.
issues on your particular plane.
Right.
Right. And of course, you also knew a lot of the other guys on the other planes.
Yeah,
Is that right?
yeah.
Okay. Okay. So you said you went from California to Florida.
Right.
Do you remember where in Florida you were?
I think it was back at the base we had been in.
Okay. So then from there you went to
Fortaleza, Brazil.
Brazil.
Yes.
Well, that surprised me.
Well, it shouldn't, because the next stop
Uh-huh.
was Dakar, Africa.
I see. Okay.
We were on our way.
Is that Northern Africa or is it West?
Well, yeah, Marrakesh is
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
up that way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we were like in Dakar for maybe 3 days, then hopped over the mountain, which you always hoped you'd make the high mountain. But there were lower spots. We'd scoot through there and then up the coastline past Brazil. Let's see, out of Brazil, Portugal. Or Spain,
Okay.
up past the greenest green you'd ever see, Ireland. And landed in that area for a modification of the plane to make any adjustments that had to be made so it could be used for combat.
Right.
And one thing that was kind of interesting, when we landed there, I think it was Scotland, right next to Ireland. The layout was such that they had like an officers club, if you would, and they had a pool table, and that had a green top, and you'd think, well, yeah, that's normal enough, until you approach close. And that green was all cash money. What had happened, none of us had been paid for 3 months. So there was an accumulation for these incoming crews, and they had nothing to do with their money. Many of them, most of them sent some home or had some sort of a cash arrangement, but that was cash that they were gambling with. Amazing, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Yeah.
So you were in Ireland now.
Scotland.
You're in Scotland. I'm sorry. You're in Scotland.
Yeah.
Your plane's been modified.
Right.
Okay.
Now, Scotland leaves me with one thought that you'll get a kick out of.
Uh-huh.
We had to sleep someplace, and this wooden building had like a second floor, just a big space, and there were folded up frames for cots, and the bed was a piece of plywood, plain plywood, but they had mattresses around, and we would go around and take other mattresses to use as blankets.
Okay.
It was so cold, I thought I was in Syracuse for a minute.
Or Buffalo.
Or Buffalo, or Rochester.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Wow. So how many nights did you have to spend there? Just the one?
I think it was 3 nights.
3 nights.
Yeah.
Okay. 3 nights under the mattresses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This business of being in the service has its moments. So we took off to an airport called Tibetan. You can spell that the best you can.
Give me a guess. Your best guess.
T-I-E-B, ham.
A-M or H-A-M?
Yeah, either
Okay.
one.
Okay.
And that's where our base would be, and that's where we'd fly our missions from.
Is that England?
That's England.
Okay. Is it southern England? You remember?
More toward the Wash, which means on the east side, more on the east side.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Tell me about your time in England. How'd you spend your time? A lot of training? How about off-duty? How about duty time? How'd you spend your time?
Well, we used to be in one of these metal huts that had the corrugated sides and roof.
Quonset huts. Quonset huts. Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And we were warned by others that shared that with us. Gee, I don't know, fellas, if you'll be lucky or not. They've been coming over every night, and they're dropping their bombs closer and closer. But you have those beds there next to that little stove. You have to keep that going yourself if you can. But, well, good night. Your first night here, you're anxious to get to sleep. Well, the devils, they had something in mind. We would get to that point where most of us had dropped off to sleep, and these buggers were on the outside with bricks, which they threw on top of the building. They would rattle down the side. Well, you can imagine the consternation that caused. So they had a sense of humor.
So they were hazing you. They were hazing the new guys.
Exactly.
They just thought that was terrific, I'm sure.
Right.
Yeah. Do you remember jumping up? You were probably asleep, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you thought the worst. And actually, there was no bombing going on, was there?
No.
In that area? Right.
No.
Yeah.
Thank goodness.
Yeah.
Well,
Now you want to take a break? Are you okay?
No, I'm
okay.
fine.
Okay. Now you were training,
right.
During the day. How about what was the thinking? Did you guys talk about going into combat in your first flights? Did you talk about that?
I don't remember that, believe it or not. We had our briefing before we would take off.
Right. But while you were training before, was there talk about what it's going to be like?
I can't say that it was.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So we were right into combat then.
Okay. What about if you had some downtime, some free time, when you weren't training, what did you do? Just hang out or?
Well, that was about it.
Yeah.
I always managed to find something to do. I managed to salvage some more plexiglass parts. And I didn't have any comfortable furniture, but I found one of the gun containers had a shape like this, so wide. And I made a chair out of that. So I would sit out in front of our hut in that chair and read.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, let's talk about when you actually went into combat. Do you remember your first?
And such?
Yes. Remember your first one?
No.
Really?
Not as being unique.
Uh-huh.
So.
You do remember it though?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And tell me about it. The briefing, and then when you took off, and what you had to do. Tell me about it.
And I knew where we were going, of course.
Uh-huh.
Being the navigator, I had that all fixed. And we look out the side of our windows, and there are other planes with us. And the clouds in front of us, or above or below us. And then we become a little startled because we see some small planes. At that point, I was looking for P-40s from Curtis Wright.
Okay, our planes. Yeah.
Right. But they were 51s, I believe.
Oh, the Mustangs, the P-51s?
Yeah.
The American planes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, we continued on, and then shortly before we were coming to target, I guess it was, we did see a couple of planes from the other side, but they seemed to be taking care of it. We dropped our load and turned around and came back.
Where was this bomb run? Do you remember where it was? No.
No,
Was it in Germany? Was it?
it would have been a German area, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And I did a total of 18 of those. Actually, I did 20 bomb runs. The other 2 were Normandy.
Right. We'll talk about that in a minute.
Right.
Okay. Do you remember how many you did prior to D-Day? How many bomb runs you had done? Just
Yeah.
your best guesstimate.
18.
Oh, you did 18 before D-Day?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they were all over the
Right.
lot.
How, were any more difficult than others?
I can't tell you specifically which ones, but there were some where you were afraid you're going to wet your pants
Okay.
more than on others.
Now, why was that? What was going on?
Enemy planes, fighters coming at us.
Okay.
We've been very fortunate in being able to survive all of those attacks. I suppose there was some damage to the plane, but it wasn't sufficient, and there were no injuries.
Okay. I know it was 18 bomb runs.
Right.
Right. What about anti-aircraft guns, flak? Did you get any of that on those 18 bomb runs?
We certainly did, all around us. Those bursts, like on the 4th of July, take away the color, and it's like the 4th of July's fireworks.
Except it's not pleasant to watch.
Well, no, as long as they're way off to the side or above or below, that's one thing. But when they start getting close to you, you know. And of course, I did observe some other planes being hit.
You did?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you see any go down?
I can't honestly say that I did. I suspect because we were so high that there were some that were hit and went down.
Now, on your bombing runs, how high were you?
Anywhere from 5,000 to, possibly 22,000.
Okay, that high.
Yeah.
Okay. Because
That's the absolute maximum we could go.
for a bomb run.
Yeah.
Now, those planes are capable of flying almost 30,000 feet, I guess, the cruising altitude in that area.
Not comfortably.
Not comfortably?
They didn't plan them like the later day planes. 22,000 was about the maximum.
You went.
Yeah.
Okay. So you've done 18 bomb runs.
Right.
Now we're going to get to D-Day.
Right.
How much preparation did you have prior to D-Day for bomb runs?
We were always like the runner who is at the starting station. You're prepared, you're ready for the word go, and we always were. And so I remember when it came time to go, someone came to the door and said, "All right, guys, this is it." We all suspected it would be coming, you know.
Right.
And this is it.
So you knew prior to D-Day, whenever that was going to be, that you'd be doing a bomb run?
Oh, yes.
You did know that?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, and you had to live with that part of it, waiting for a go for weeks, a few weeks?
Yeah.
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 Not knowing when you'd be called.
Right.
Any moment.
Right.
Okay. So now you were called.
Right.
How'd you feel?
Relief, believe it or not. That's what we're here for, guys. Let's do it. So, of course, the startling thing is the actual flying into this deal. Because when we flew in, there were planes on the left, on the right, above, below us. You'd have to experience it to get the tremendous impact, because it wasn't just the planes. It was planes with plywood gliders loaded with men behind many of our planes. There were below us the military of the Navy, and you could literally walk right across the water.
The channel.
Onto,
So you had a real visual of the invasion itself,
absolutely.
and the tremendous resources that were being used as you were flying over.
Because with the Navy, it wasn't just their big planes or big ships, but their specialized ships that were made to go onto the beaches. And a tremendous number of small boats that had been donated or requisitioned, if you want to call it that, so that it was almost solid with craft on the sea.
So
unfortunate situation, because there's no way we could avoid being hit, could avoid losing planes and ships.
what time did you take off? Was it of the day? What time of the day? Do you remember when you actually took off?
Yeah.
Was it evening, afternoon,
No, it was
morning?
early morning.
Early morning.
Early morning, right.
Now, I know from reading that the actual invasion started about 6:30 when they hit the beach. So if you were taking off early morning, there was enough light. You did have a bird's eye view of the whole scope of the invasion, because you were in the air.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Is there any one? Okay, fantastic.
You tried to describe it, Don, but unless they had tremendously good motion pictures, you don't get the impact.
Right.
And as you observe and you see assault ships and vessels go onto the beach and see men pouring out of them and not making it.
You witnessed that.
Sure.
You could see that from the air.
Oh, yeah.
Were you thinking, maybe I'm better off here than I am down there?
Well, except that now the flak is tremendous.
Okay. Obviously, the Germans are pushing back.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, tell me about that. When did you start getting the flak? Because there was really no planes. The Germans didn't have much of an air force left then.
Right.
So it was mostly flak anti-aircraft guns.
Right.
Tell me when that started.
Well, as soon as we arrived on the fringe of the action, it was there.
Okay.
And they were good. They real professionals. Yeah.
What was, at this point, you're watching this action, you've seen the scope of this invasion, it's fantastic, you said, what you're seeing. How did you feel about, going into this action, you yourself?
I had accepted that a long time before. That's what we're here for. That's what we can expect. So we got to our target, and the weather had turned a little iffy. And we made a run for the target, but it was so bad that we didn't drop our bombs. We turned around, made another run, and on this occasion, bombardier, I guess it was, decided to drop them, and we dropped them. And
Do you remember what kind of target it was?
it was somewhat inside from the shore,
Okay.
more like a town type thing,
Uh-huh.
because that's what it was,
Right.
And so we dropped our bombs and headed back home. Okay, we got back home, loaded up with more bombs, turned around, and came back.
And what time was this now?
Oh, Lord, I don't know.
Was it
It'd be late afternoon.
late afternoon by this point?
Yeah.
Okay, now tell me what you saw then, how it was different, what you viewed going over late afternoon than what you saw earlier.
Well, you could make out the water, see the actual water in areas that you couldn't before because of the number of vessels
Right.
down there.
Right.
And
right.
of course, we had some big ships that were dropping cannons gear. They were doing a fantastic job from way out.
They were still firing out?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Well, could you tell as you, excuse me a minute, I just wanted to,
go ahead.
could you tell as you were flying toward the beach now? Now you're going over the beach a second time, right? Over the area.
We crossed over the beach.
Could you tell that a beachhead had been established at that point, or you couldn't tell anything?
Not really, because the fellas would have been so scattered.
Yeah.
That's the only way they had any protection.
Yeah, they couldn't be out in the open and say, hi, here we are. Yeah.
Okay, so we go to our target, and again the weather was lousy. So we pass over and take a turn, come back for a second run, and no change. So we bypassed dropping it. And we then had to make up our minds. We're over here to drop bombs. So we decided to make a third run.
Okay.
A third run. We swing around, come over, the same altitude, the same airspeed, same height, of course, altitude. And that's when I got hit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
The plane suffered some damage, but I was the only crew member hit. Thank God. I said, if it's got to be someone, let it be me. We got 10 guys. I'll take the shot.
Why did you feel that way? Why did you feel that way? Wouldn't it be normal to say, well, I want the other guy, not me?
Well, that's what is normal to some people.
Uh-huh.
My normal is what I did.
Okay.
Okay.
Now, you were in the front of the plane, in the nose.
Very tip, as I
Next to
showed
the navigator, right?
Right.
And it was flak that came
It
through?
was flak,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
And flak usually is very small pieces, well scattered. And I knew we had been hit, meaning the plane, so I reached up to get my control for my speaker to the pilot. I was going to see what his situation was. And my arm didn't seem to reach up. This one was fine, but this one was
Your right arm. You're swinging your right arm.
just hanging.
Okay.
All right. So I believe I did attempt to use my left hand, and it wasn't effective.
Because you're right-handed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I did notice something else. I was looking out for rain. Rain? Because my feet were slipping all over the floor. I could hardly stand up. My shoes were going on all directions. Well, it turns out that was blood.
Your blood.
That was my blood.
Okay.
What a revelation. So things got pretty muddy then. And one of the crew members, I'm not sure who it was, apparently had paid attention to me, and I must have sat down on the floor. And they determined to take me up and put me behind the pilot for some reason. That's
So they had
what I was showing you.
how did they get you? They dragged you
Yeah, they just
underneath
dragged-
the pilot's area and then brought you up to where the
Well,
pilot
it was the same level.
was the same level? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But on the way, I noticed that someone had attempted to put a tourniquet on it. And if ever I was grateful for having had an interest in Boy Scouting, it was then. Because I noticed that they had put the tourniquet on backwards. They put it on after the wound, rather than above it where they stopped the flow of blood.
Right.
So I managed to undo it and redo it enough, and then after that I blanked out.
You did pass out.
But I did
You
start.
think you were in shock? I'm
Yeah.
sure.
Oh yeah.
You know,
That's what it was.
yeah.
And then I was aware that they worked me down the plane. But the next thing I remembered, we had landed. The plane had suffered some damage. I think I pointed out, like the propellers, a couple of them, which I learned later on from people reporting. A couple of the wheels suffered bad damage, but our great pilot had managed to land it. So I woke up about then, and I was outside of the plane. I knew that, and I was laying on a gurney, and there were people around me. And I didn't have much of any feelings, but I knew I was flat, and I knew something wasn't right. And this was key. My Boy Scout efforts had helped. Here is a doctor leaning over me, and he has a pen, and he is stabbing me. Can you feel that? And Lord, forgive me, I lied. I said, oh, yes, yes. And he backed off, and the priest who was giving me last rites left the effort go, and I blanked out then.
Because you said you could feel it? The priest left?
Well, I guess the doctor...
Or did he give last rites and then he left? I mean, you may have...
Oh, yeah, he gave me the last
He
rites.
gave you the last rites, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And whoever concluded that, the next thing I knew, I was in a hospital.
So you blanked out again after they took you out of the plane? Okay.
I was out.
Okay. So the next thing you knew, you woke up in the hospital.
Yeah. And the hospital really wasn't a hospital. It was a huge barn at a floor level with 2 rows of beds next to one another.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in one of those beds.
Mm-hmm.
And I was conscious of people moving around. I probably was out, I would say, probably a couple of days without any knowledge of what was going on. But then when I woke up, I guess they were feeding me, or I had some food or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But I do have to mention one of life's little noticeable things. Way at the far end, I see a young woman had come in the door. She must have been attractive because I could tell she was a young girl.
Mm-hmm.
and she stopped at each bed very slowly, and she had something that she was giving the occupant. Wonder what that's all about. When she got to me, I found out. She opens up her hand and she says, "Please, only take one." She had some wild strawberries. She had just picked outside the door.
Mm-hmm.
And in her thoughtfulness was...
And you remember that. Wow, that really meant something to you. Yeah.
Even now it does.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
Well, that's my story.
Okay, now, I'm not going to let you off the hook here. We got a little more here to talk about.
Yeah, okay.
Okay,
well,
you came to,
yeah,
and this wonderful angel came to you, so to speak, and showed you some concern and care.
encouragement.
Encouragement.
Yeah.
And you're laying here, did you think, where's my arm? Did I lose my arm? Did you think of any of that? Or
Actually, I didn't, to the point where I'm conscious of it now.
Uh-huh.
But I know this, that I was going to try my best to do what I could. And after a while, I was able to sit up. You try to get dressed, you know, and if you've never tried it, you want to try tying a tie with one hand.
I don't think so.
But it's even more of a challenge. Putting on your shoes and lacing them up and tying them with one hand. I found I could do it.
Really?
Yeah. Okay, so it's obvious I'm going to be there for a while, which was true. And this 4th of July represents 67 years from the point at which they evacuated me, along with others, from that spot to the old Cantonment Hospital on Long Island.
Okay.
Flight to that hospital.
Now, you flew over?
Yep.
You took
They
a plane?
flew us over in an ambulance plane.
Mm-hmm.
And
Can you tell me about the care that you had?
excellent.
Mm-hmm.
It's been that way everywhere I've been in connection with the VA.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, okay.
Now, when did you realize, when did you get to the point that you were going to live? First of all, you were going to live.
Yeah.
And secondly, your arm was going to survive. When did you get to that point?
Maybe about the time when I found I could tie my shoe.
Okay. Was that in England or was that back in the States?
That was in England.
That was in England.
Yeah.
Did the doctors come and talk to you about this, your injury? And
They must have.
okay.
I don't recall it as such.
Okay. Okay.
All I know is they came one day and said, well, tomorrow we're going to put you on a plane. You're going back home to the old Canton Hospital.
Okay. How long were you in England and in that hospital?
Well, I was hit on the 6th, and I left over there on July 4th, whatever length of time that is.
About a month.
Okay.
Okay.
When we arrived at the hospital, I had my wife's telephone number, and I borrowed a nickel to use on the telephone.
At this point, your wife had no idea that you were injured.
Oh, yes.
Oh, she did know that.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
We used to write every day. And of course, I had told her before. I didn't tell you about the marriage, but I should. I should have done that because it was before I went overseas.
Right.
Do you want me to read?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Definitely.
It's an interesting and amusing thing. I was still, of course, at the Monroe, Louisiana school and all, and she had gotten a leave. She did it the tough way. She just skipped out from New York, came down, and we decided to get married. We hadn't been. So I requested permission, which you are obliged to do, and got that, and went to the local church. Fran had a all-male wedding party. All-male.
Really?
Yeah, all-male wedding. But after the ceremony, we were married. It was necessary to get a marriage license. So the priest is an old guy, and he's typing it up, and she looks over his shoulder, and she says, "Father, you're marrying me to the best man?" So she took the papers, she typed out the marriage license.
Right.
But as you can imagine, that's caused a lot of laughs.
Oh, I'm sure it has over the years too.
Yeah.
I'm sure it has.
69 years, did she say? That's a long time.
Yeah. Yep. Yes, it is.
Well, okay.
So you're in Long Island. You're in the hospital. Your wife knows you've been injured.
Oh, yes.
The government probably didn't they send a telegram or something?
Yeah.
To her to inform?
Yeah.
Okay. And you guys were able to write.
Right.
How was you able to write letters? You're right-handed.
Well, that's no problem. You write left-handed.
Okay.
Hey, it's maybe not good.
But you could
learn.
get something on paper. You could communicate.
Yeah,
You could write.
to this day, I can scribble enough
Uh-huh.
to make sense.
Right.
I told you about borrowing money to make a phone call.
Yeah, you borrowed the nickel.
I guess I disturbed her. I was able to reach her on that call. And I said, well, no, I want you to be prepared. I don't look so good. I don't look so good. And I don't know what she was picturing. But I said, yeah, I lost my razor.
You ever the jokester, right?
Oh, yeah. Having a sense of humor is a wonderful asset, Don.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the actual mechanics of how they handled my injury, do you want me to go into that?
Absolutely, yes.
All right. The injury was severe enough that they couldn't use a stick for a, what do they call it when they?
A splint?
Splint.
Mm-hmm.
They had to mold plaster one. And so they did that. And then it was necessary to recognize the need to keep the hand pulled against the elbow, to definitely have them that way. So this one doctor who was very clever. He had a device like a horseshoe, and he ran a stainless steel rod through all the knuckles with the hand there. Then they had a cord with the weight on the end of it, which they threw over a frame around the bed, over a rod, and hanging down with quite a weight. And then here there'd be a saddle and another weight pulling down. And that I had to live with for about 3-4 weeks at least.
Were you in bed all this while too?
All this while, yeah.
Okay.
Then after that, they felt that they could sustain the plaster holder, and they relieved that approach. And I was able to get out of bed and move around and all.
Mm-hmm.
It was at that point we had some visitors come in that made life interesting. Carmen, the band leader, Carmen Miranda.
Okay.
You know him?
I think I've heard the name.
At least you know it's a Spanish or Mexican band leader.
Mm-hmm.
Very well known. I mean, like top rate.
Right.
He was one of the visitors that came through the hospital and all, which was great. But he also has a talent. This guy is quite an artist, and he was making silhouettes of patients' faces. So he made me one. Wasn't that nice?
Yes.
There's a woman that also traveled with him, Carmen Miranda.
Okay.
You know that name?
I've heard the name.
She's the one that has a fancy hat with all the fruit.
Yes.
Vegetable.
Yes.
She was there.
Uh-huh.
Okay. So it had its moments. But I have to mention my next to me chair partner at lunch one day. Lunch is a very brief experience, but who should it be but Eleanor Roosevelt?
Is that right? Wonderful.
So I have fun with that too. Oh, you may have done a lot of things, but you've never had lunch with Eleanor Roosevelt.
That's for sure. That's for sure.
So-
Tell me about that. Tell me about it.
Well, that was it.
Uh-huh.
She was not a talkative person, I'll tell you.
Oh, she
and
wasn't.
lunch was very short.
I see.
As a matter of fact, reflecting back, she did not give an address to the room. It was lunch, and then they scattered to make more visits in the different departments.
Uh-huh. Okay. She had a lot of people to see.
Oh, yeah, right. Which is what she was there for.
Right. Right.
And that's about my story.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Okay,
continued treatment. One thing that I don't know if I should mention this or not,
No problem.
but they took me in for surgery to remove the cast and all. There were 4 or 5 doctors marching into the surgery with me on a gurney.
Mm-hmm.
And I hear the one say to the other, "Why, I would have amputated that arm." But the reply was another doctor, the guy who
put the rod in your hand.
Right.
Right.
He was a New York Jewish surgeon.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
I don't want to start any controversy, but I like to see credit go
Where
where
credit's
it's
due to the surgeon. Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. He's willing to walk the extra mile to try.
Yes, and he saved my arm.
That's right. Yeah.
And it wasn't that the arm was not usable. This didn't happen overnight. I was in medical care from D-Day to the 26th of March when I was discharged.
About 9 months, 9 to 10 months.
A long time.
That's right. Now you were under medical care and rehabilitation also, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Rehab?
Yeah.
Okay.
My rehab, by and large, consisted in walking. I had them make up on the flight line a bag for me of leather with handles, and I loaded that with lead shot, and I would walk with that pulling my arm down. A trick that I observed when I was a little boy. Our neighbor, you've heard of the Cleveland Clinic, have you?
Yes.
This gentleman was an employee there, and they had a bad fire, and he had major problems with both arms, and part of his treatment was to walk with 2 bags of weights, and he did that for months as our neighbor, and that left an impression in my 9 or 10-year-old mind.
Mm-hmm. So you did your own rehab, basically.
Right.
So did you do this during that 9-month period?
Oh, yeah.
Care? You did that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we even got down to White Sulphur Springs. You were
In Arkansas?
what that is?
Arkansas?
Yeah. No, it's West Virginia, I believe.
Oh, West Virginia. Okay, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And a magnificent thing that the railroad set up for customers. They'd take them there on the train, and they have magnificent surroundings and all. But the Air Force took it over, and they used it as a checking spot for nerves and other specific difficult control parts of the body.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to clear that before they would discharge me.
Mm-hmm.
After that, I was on my own.
Okay. So this is the end of March now.
Yeah.
How often did you see your wife?
We had a nice arrangement. Garden City is on Long Island. We had managed to locate a family that had a house with a spare room that were willing to take as tenants the military. Mr. and Mrs. Bull.
Mm-hmm.
And we actually roomed there while I was still at the old Cantonment Hospital.
I see.
That helped my recovery tremendously.
I'm sure. Now, did you have to go back to the hospital like every day or every couple days?
Yeah, frequently.
Frequently.
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. Until they said you were good to go.
Right.
Now, at the end of March, you said you were discharged. You were discharged from medical care. No.
Discharged from the service.
From the service.
Yeah.
Discharged you completely.
Yeah.
And this is March 1945.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Your duty was over.
46 maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Did I say 46?
No, 45.
25. 26 was the day. Yeah.
Yeah, 1945.
Yeah. Right.
So.
Correct.
Then what?
Well, then we came back to Buffalo. And Fran had no problem being released from the service, of course. And I can recall sitting like we are here. Where do we go from here? We've been around Florida, we've been around California, we've been around a lot of the country. We've even seen some of Europe. We could go any place in the world. So we started to evaluate, and there wasn't anything that stood out per se. And believe it or not, I couldn't believe it myself. We finally determined, well, Buffalo's not the best place in the world, but why not?
Mm-hmm.
And we decided in the Buffalo area. So we decided we didn't want Buffalo as a city to be the base, but maybe another town around. So you know what Williamsville is,
Yes.
perhaps, and there are about 5 different areas.
Mhm.
And we went over them. Hamburg is another one, and decided finally, well, we'll find one of these spots. And eventually, we checked out in Hamburg with a chap named Suprell, and told him what we wanted, that we just didn't have that much money that we could buy a house, but we would be interested in something very modest on the outskirts. Well, this guy was a good salesman, and he said, I think I've got just the thing for you. There's an unfinished cottage outside of Hamburg. It's got 4 or 5 acres of land with it, and Orchard Park is where it's supposed to be. Go out and take a look at it. Well, we did, and I think we were nuts maybe when I think back. Here's this nice little place, very small cottage. The only plumbing in the place is from a well, a drilled well in the basement with 1 pump. That was it.
Mhm.
And it had been apparently the idea of an individual that he and his girlfriend were going to live there, because there were some articles of furniture in the place that he would leave. And it had a nice little barn, which was 2 stories, about as big as from here to that wall,
Mhm.
and about yay wide, big enough to hold a car, maybe 2 cars, and lots of space. Well, we always liked a challenge. We bought the damn place for $6,500. And this was in November. We by then had a 3-month-old child. That was Dean. And we moved in the wintertime. No driveway, but provisions, which I made later on, for a circular drive. But there was no real drive. And we go in, get established. The electricity works fine, and the pump does pump water, but there's no John even.
Mhm.
Okay, well, we'll make the best of it, because there's an outhouse. I was working in downtown Buffalo at the time. The next morning, I take my briefcase, kiss her goodbye for the day, walk to the outhouse, and the door is frozen shut.
It's only in Buffalo, right?
Right, you could appreciate
Yes,
this.
yes.
So I pound on it till I'm able to get it open. And that was our start.
Okay.
And from that, we built a house.
On that land?
Yeah,
On that land. And that was the Orchard Park area,
yeah,
as it turned out.
right.
And that area developed tremendously over
Oh,
the
yeah.
years. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, you said you went back to college under the GI
Under
Bill?
the GI Bill, yeah.
Okay.
They gave me a certain number of hours credit,
Mhm.
and I was able to complete the 4-year requirement in 2.5 years.
Okay, so you take advantage of the GI Bill
Yeah,
and you go to the University of Buffalo.
right.
And what do you study?
what do they call it when it's just business
major, I guess.
business
Yeah.
major? All right.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's what it would be.
Right. And after you graduate,
After I graduate, you don't want to hear all the jobs that I've had because
well, are
I'll
they?
tell you what they're related to.
Yeah, there's got to be
Okay.
a theme
Yeah,
here, right?
there is.
Okay.
And that would be labor relations,
Okay.
personnel,
Uh-huh.
injury prevention,
Mm-hmm.
and that's pretty much
Okay.
it.
This was in the private sector?
Yeah,
Okay. Okay.
yeah.
So you worked for several companies over the years.
Yes, I did.
Okay. All in the Buffalo area.
All in the Buffalo area.
And that's where you raised your family.
I can name a few of them if you wish.
Sure.
They're Bell Aero Systems
Mhm.
and Bell Space Systems. I went back to Curtis briefly. Cornell, Corning, I guess it was. I even hit Sears and Roebuck, but the payoff was I got a call one day from Red Cross. They had a new need for their blood program in the region. And apparently they had remembered my service with speaking to local people.
Right.
So this fitted my need and my desire because I liked the job and I liked the idea of being of service to the city and the country. So I went with them and it was just what I wanted. We covered the industry. We'd go to the big manufacturing places, the big retailers, all the big stuff. I dealt with two other people, Elmer Markham and who was the fellow like Dale Carnegie?
Where are you now? What company?
The guy that I used to work with in speaking. Oh, well, whatever, in any event.
I have forgotten that too.
Let me just interject that
Yeah.
Howard's wife, Frances, has just sat down here
Yeah.
for a couple of minutes, and that's who you're hearing. He's
Harry
actually here.
Stroman.
Okay.
Harry Stroman. He had also
Now, what were you trying to get these people to do?
give blood.
Oh, okay.
And
Blood
between,
drives.
yeah, for the region.
Mhm.
The three of us, I'm quite sure, for the period that I was with the Red Cross, were instrumental in the collection of over 50,000 pints of blood.
Mhm. How long were you with the Red Cross?
About 2.5 years.
Mhm. Okay.
And,
Let me kind of jump ahead here.
Yeah, go
How'd you
ahead.
end up in Gainesville?
Pardon me?
How did you end up in Gainesville?
Our son Dean, for the most part, and our son David, both have lived here in this area, and they know my background and they know our need, and they examined the type of place that this is in the area, and they came to the conclusion that this was the best there is.
Okay. And you came to Gainesville when?
Uh,
A year and a half ago.
Oh, just a year and a half ago. You were in Buffalo all this?
No,
up
we
until
were
then?
in St. Mary's, Georgia for about a year, I think, something like that.
Okay.
We decided to move down here because, because of the boys being here,
Sure.
and we came here so much. We traveled down here so much in the winter, and decided, well, maybe it'd be a good idea to move down here.
Mm-hmm.
And as I said, because we had a couple boys down here, it worked out pretty good. And we had to sell our house. It was huge place. And after all, we had 5 kids, so you can imagine it was
Sure.
big. And it was like a semi-farm, and we didn't need it.
When did you move to Georgia?
Well, let's see. We were there a couple of years, and we've been here a year and a half, so that was 3.5 years
Okay.
ago, I guess.
So you're talking about the big home was in Buffalo, you sold. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
Orchard
it was
Park.
Okay,
actually
that's where you
Orchard
raised your
Park.
family, Orchard Park, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Then
And
the
we
Georgia
moved,
homes, okay.
well, for a while after we sold that, we lived in an apartment in Orchard Park for a very short time,
Yeah.
maybe a year at the most.
mhm.
And then we came south.
Right, right.
That little cottage turned out to be a big house. We raised the roof 6 feet 4 inches,
Uh-huh.
added an additional bedroom and a front porch and a garage. So it ended up as a big house.
Well, you know, up north, you have a basement and you have an attic. You don't
Exactly.
have that here.
Exactly.
And so we had a big house.
Yeah, I bet. I'm going to ask you one question. It might be somewhat sensitive, personal.
Yeah.
Don't have to answer, but I commonly ask this question of the veterans, and particularly the ones who've gone through combat.
Mm-hmm.
You experienced a terrible injury, tremendous
Okay.
injury. You were wounded in combat.
Can't deny it.
How were you able to deal with that after the war? Did you have I've talked to a lot of the guys, a lot of the veterans, and in fact, every one of I've talked to have had flashbacks or dreams and things of that sort. Did you experience any of that?
Nah. No.
Yeah, I know you.
Well, you know,
He's so matter of fact.
Well, that's true. This is our life, and this is what I expected, that there would be pluses and minuses.
Mhm.
You roll with them.
He's got a great
best
sense of
you
humor.
can.
Great sense of humor.
well, you know,
Thank you.
really, he was very fortunate. I don't know if he told you that when he was wounded, the doctor, were in France, I guess you came down, had never, I shouldn't say operated, never removed a limb.
Uh-huh.
And as a result, he said, heck with it, I'm not going to do it, I'll let the next guy do it. So he patched up his arm, and it was draining. And he sent him back to the States. Well, when he got back, they just decided, well, they saved it this long, we'll save it longer.
Right.
Otherwise, he would have lost it.
Right.
It was just one of those things.
Well, he did tell me the story when they took him into surgery to take off the cast and that. One of the doctors said, I would have amputated
Yeah,
this.
that was
Right.
right.
Yeah. Very fortunate.
One of the unusual things that isn't very pleasant to discuss, but I like your idea of getting to the real facts. When I had that cast and had my limb hung up over the bed,
Right.
every morning they had to drain the cast of the pus
Right.
and the pus, and there was a cup of it every morning.
Mm-hmm.
I never expected that, but there was no pain connected to it.
Right. Well, yeah, that's why I ask these kind of questions, because there's always more to the story. And most of the World War II veterans have a tendency to be somewhat stoic about their
Were you in the
service and what they did.
service?
Yeah, I was in the Army, yeah.
Okay.
I wasn't in combat. Fortunately, I was
Yeah.
never in combat. And I think you being in combat would understand that statement, that fortunately I was not in combat. And it doesn't go without cost,
Yes.
whether it be physical or mental. I guess I'm kind of editorializing here, but
Yeah.
and that's why, like you say, I like to get to, if you choose to tell that part of your story, you don't have to.
Right.
But I thought I'd ask the questions, and
Yeah.
you can answer or you don't have to
Well,
answer.
when I agreed to sit with you,
Uh-huh.
I had knowledge of this attitude
Mm-hmm.
and had faith in you.
Well, I appreciate that. Appreciate that.
Did you tell him about your little bag with the rock?
Yes, he did. Yes, he did. I used to lift it or pull when you used to walk with it. You mean that one? That story? Yeah, yeah, yeah. He told me that one too.
That's all. I have nothing more.
Is there anything else you'd like to add about your service or your attitude about it, or anything you want to add? This is your time. You don't have to.
I'd like to compliment the service we've been given at the local VA hospital.
Mhm.
It's been excellent. The facility has been kept up. It's clean. The people have had a sympathetic attitude to everyone that I've observed.
And this is the VA hospital in Gainesville. I wanted to
Right.
get that on the record.
That's an
Yeah,
excellent
Yeah,
hospital.
Yeah.
really.
We have a son, a doctor there.
Oh, he is. Oh, he is a doctor there. You
Well,
didn't-
he's a doctor of
Oh, pharmacy. Pharmacy. Well, he is. He is, yes. That's right. That's right. You told me that.
Yeah.
In terms of disability, you have a disability,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. How do they grade that?
Well, now you're in a sensitive area.
Yeah.
And because there is much controversy and points of view, I'd rather not get too
Okay.
deeply into that. But I will say this, I've been satisfied with my evaluation.
Bottom line, you've been, okay. That's good. That's very good. And I'm glad you say that because there's a lot of controversy about the Veterans Administration and how overworked. I mean, there's so much for them to do, so much work.
Oh, yeah.
But I actually have heard nothing but praise about the facilities, the medical care. That's
Oh.
my experience. I'm just saying what my
I
experience
think
is.
it's wonderful.
Yeah, good. I'm glad. Okay. Well, we're at the end here. We're going to wrap it up. I'm going to turn off the recorder.